Hi guys, it's Sandra here from Creating Spain. Now I apologise in advance, this is going to be a long video. If you don't have the time to watch it now, put it on your bookmark list and watch it later. Now the reason it's going to be a long video is because it's going to be an in-depth look at the latest Shortcuts a Lot software. I'm using Shortcuts a Lot version 5 Pro, the latest and highest grade software in their package. So if there are particular features that you see in this that you really want, I suggest you check with the Craft Edge site to make sure that that feature is included in the version that you want to purchase. You can, if you have older versions of Shortcuts a Lot, upgrade by just paying for the upgrade rather than the whole package. The prices are on their website. This is not sponsored. If you're in the mind to watch it, grab yourself a drink, get a comfy chair, make yourself nice and comfortable, and I shall begin. And I'm going to start off with the very top left menu. About Shortcuts a Lot Pro, that will just give you the details of what version it is, etc. Now the next one is Preferences, and this one is quite an important but often overlooked menu. Now in here you have quite a few variations that you can choose, and it's up to your personal preference what you like. Saving dots per inch, I go for 96 because I find that's convenient for me. It depends on what you want to do with your images afterwards, but I use 96 and that's it. So remember the last matte size, pretty obvious. Auto scale the matte to fit the window, so this fits my window. Keep the matte visible while cutting, well, obviously pretty obvious. Automatically switch property tabs based on the current selection, yeah, fine. Warn me about having too many fonts installed. If you have too many fonts installed, and I don't know what the number is, it will give you a warning. I have a lot of fonts installed and I don't get any warnings, so I have no idea. Embed images in project files. Now this is a new one, relatively new one, so that when you're looking at your projects later on, you can see little drawings of what they actually are. Very good one to have checked. And in the edit section, we have constrain angle. Now this is for when you're drawing lines and you want to stop it from going in a certain direction. So you can have 15 degrees, 30 degrees, and so on and so forth. Now the nudge refers to placement. So if I can't do it because this is actually open. If I was to go to this one here, I can show you what the nudge is, but I can't do that at the moment. And it will move it, every time you nudge it, it will move it a certain amount. Now the arrow keys are those keys which are on your keyboard, so you can alter the amount for this. Now it's very good to have it set to something that you know, oh yes, if I press this key 5 times it's going to move it a centimetre. Okay, that sort of stuff. It's very useful. Keep objects on the mat when dragging. When I first got Shortcuts a Lot, I had that checked automatically and I couldn't understand why I couldn't take anything off the mat. So I frequently use this area for working on things, so I definitely don't want that one checked. Keep the proportions as a default, pretty obvious. Do not keep proportions on free transforms. So if I have it checked, it doesn't keep the properties, so I could skew it out of proportion. So I might have it longer than it should be or whatever. Okay. Default shadow size. Actually, I'm going to change this because I have mine normally set to 1.1. So that's just default. It'll automatically do that unless you tell it otherwise. Okay. Automatically simplify shapes and simplify threshold. This will automatically take out a few extra nodes that maybe aren't doing anything useful. However, if I do something like I take a bunch of shapes and I combine them and I take one side from another, or I do anything much in the way of editing, I always go to another menu and do a simplify because it usually makes the cutting machine run much smoother. Never fill open paths. Okay. Open paths are things like, well, If you compare a river to a pond, a river would be open path and with no ends, as it were, and a pond has a line around it. So if you are concerned about having closed paths, and it's generally a good idea to know which paths are closed and which ones are open, then have that checked. Occasionally I uncheck it for a specific purpose, but usually I keep it checked. And this one here, restore defaults, that will set it back to factory settings. So click OK and that's done. So back up to our full menu, we've got services, nothing in there. Hide. And I'm not sure what that's supposed to hide actually, and hide others. I haven't come across those before. I'll have to investigate those. And obviously quit. So under the file menu, we've got lots and lots of different things. New project, open a existing project, I should say. Close all projects, save project as, revert to whatever you had it before, import, export, trace image, yeah. Placing image is when you actually just want to put a picture on your screen to work from. Scan to cut, I will have to do a separate video on that. I haven't done one on scan to cut for ages. Too big a project to do in this. FCM batch convert, not something I've ever used. Send to shortcuts a lot too. I can't imagine why you'd actually want to do that, but it's possible to do it. The E-shape store is for obviously the shortcuts lot E-shapes. Share project, so I'm guessing you can do what you normally do. That wasn't one that was in the software previously, but I'm guessing that it does the sharing as normal file sharing would be on other apps. Page setup, now this is an important one. Even if I have this mat size set to A4, which I do, if I print and I don't have the page set up to A4, it's not going to print properly. So page setup. Now as you can see, this one, I've got it automatically set to A5 because I do quite a lot of printing for my stamp making and I print on A5 for that. So if I was going to print anything in here and I wanted it to print properly, I would change that to A4. And I've got two printers, so I have a choice of printers there. Okay. And recent projects, that gives you all the most recent things that you worked on, and again, quit. Okay, edit. You've got undo and redo, cut and copy, paste. Paste in place. Now this is really, really useful. If you've copied something and you want to put a copy of it directly over the top of it, to do something else too, and I frequently do that. Paste in place is what you want. Paste as in autofill. Let me just show you. Get a shape here and go to copy and then go to paste autofill, and it will put as many of those shapes in the page as it can. Select all, deselect all, and your preferences again. So that will bring up your preferences in the same way as it would from the main listing for shortcuts a lot. So object, transform, you have move, rotate, scale, flip horizontal, mirroring, flip vertical, and you have auto fit. The auto fit is interesting. If I do a shape here and then I go to the object transform and then auto fit, it'll make it fit the page like that. Isn't that clever? But I'm going to undo that now. So where have we got to? Right, auto fit was the last one there. Arrange. This arranges items in your layers basically, so it brings it to the front or sends it to the back, whatever you need to do. Aligning to page, selection, align left, right, It's pretty obvious what that does. And distribute. If you have more than one object and you want to distribute them evenly in one way or another, that's the one you want to use. We've got group and ungroup, which are greyed out because I only have one object. Break apart is when you break everything apart and you can do whatever you like with it. Clip path and clip mask, they're not things that I've ever used, so you'll have to look up how to do those yourself. If you're used to using things like CorelDRAW and so on, you're probably used to that. I haven't done any mask editing as such for years, so my brain's basically forgotten it. Duplicate is obviously where you can duplicate things, and you can have the total number of columns and rows, and you can set the spacing, and you can also group the duplicate if you want to. And the other one, which is very handy, is the duplicate rotated. And this one will allow you to duplicate all sorts of things, and you can move them as indeed you wish. And again, you can group them and cancel that. So hide. Hide is very handy. Oh, get my tongue out of a knot. Because sometimes you want to work on something and whatever you've got around it is distracting you. So hiding is very good for that. And then if you've hidden something, you then click on show all to get it back in view. And again, lock is handy. Now, lock stops you from moving the locked object, obviously, but you can still see it. So if you want to do something to a higher layer, but you want to make sure you don't accidentally do something to the layer below it, that's the one to use for that. Okay, path. You have all the usual Boolean path tools like union, intersection, exclude, front minus back, back minus front. And this is where the simplify button is. Now it won't do anything on here because I've only got form nodes, but you can set your threshold. The higher the threshold, the more alteration it will do. So you can play with that to your heart's content. Split path will split paths apart, pretty obviously. Reversing path reverses the way that it draws the path, which sometimes you might want to change. Can't think of any examples offhand. Object to path, if you have a design which is very busy, got lots of different nodes, object to path makes it so that the software finds it easier to handle. Close path, pretty obvious. Join paths, again, pretty obvious. Offset path, that will just offset. So instead of adding a shadow layer and then having to take an inside layer away, the offset automatically takes away the original shape. Stroked path. This one is handy if, for example, you've put in some text and you want to really alter the text considerably. Then if you apply stroke to path, it stops being text and the program sees it as just lines and nodes and things. So it's quite handy to use. Layer, add a layer folder, duplicate the current layer, delete the current layer. Arrange, show or hide layers, lock or unlock, and layer properties. You can obviously, alter the properties. Now this is an interesting one. You've got page. You can add a page, delete a page, set the page properties, and so on and so forth. And with this particular version of the software, you can add new projects as well. So if you open other projects at the same time, you'll just get a load of tabs along here showing what's open. Effects, a 3D extrude, that's pretty obvious, a 3D rotate, barrel distortion, bridge warp, bulge, canned, drop shadow. There's far too many for me to do this in detail, but I'll just go through them. Knockout is very, very useful. Now let me demonstrate knockout because it's one of the more useful ones. I'm going to give that a different color fill so we can see what's going on. Okay, so I have my green one here and I put my pink one in and I move this to the front. There we are. And I want to knock this shape out of that shape. So select them both, go to Effects, go to Knockout. Now you can add a gap if you want. If I put a gap in here, you'll be able to see it a bit better. And preview, you see? So it's going to knock it out like that. Or you can have it without a gap. So, you know, it's up to you. So if I do that, I now have the original shape still, and then I have the piece where it's been punched out. Whereas if you did an exclude, you would lose this original shape. And it will go through all layers. If I was to have another layer behind that, it would act like a physical punch and it go through the entire lot. So that is really, really handy. If you need to position layers on top of each other for card making, where you have frames and frames within frames and so on, it's a really, really useful tool to have. Okay, let's pop that over there, out of the way. And we have lattice. Line fill is when you want to do some embossing designs and things of that nature. Or you might possibly use it to do engraving, that type of thing. Nest, right. Nest is one of those that I don't think Shortcut Slot has the best nesting feature of all time, put it that way. If I were to put lots of shapes on here, okay, then choose them all and then go to nest. Right, it lets me set area width and area height. It lets me set the spacing and the maximum number of rotations I'm prepared to put up with, and the fit threshold, and I can ungroup and select. I'm not sure exactly what the fit threshold does. I might have to play around with that one. But if you update preview, that's how it's going to put it. Now, from what I have found, if I cancel this, so let's move, oops, take these, put them over there. Right, edit, copy, edit, paste, edit, paste, edit, paste. Right. Now if I want to put all of this lot in here, let's see what happens. So effects, nest. Now you can see we have overlapping shapes in here. So if I look at this, we've got overlapping shapes. It doesn't automatically tell you that you have too many, which is a bit of a problem. The other thing that it doesn't do, which for example Silhouette Studio can do, and I have Silhouette Studio as well, I have the pro version of that, is allow you to draw, say, a wiggly shape, get some shapes, put it in there, and it will conform to that. This one will only nest in a rectangle. So not the best. It's bordering on useful to me, but not overly. So I'm just going to clear this up. Right. Object on path. Now object on path is a useful one. So we have a thing here. Now I'm going to go to the library and pick out a shape just for ease of use. Close that down. And I'm going to make this a bit smaller. Select it, go to Effects, Object on Path, and I want to fill the path length. I want spacing of 0.10 centimeters or 1 millimeter, and I want auto preview, and that's going to be what you get. So you can mess around with the spacing. And you can mess around with the alignment, so middle, or you can have it to the top, or you can have it however you want it, and you can also offset them. So a very useful tool to have, and it gets used a lot by me. Right, pierce. Okay, this is for people who use a piercing tool, which is a bit like a needle, and it like punches very tiny holes, so that will allow piercing to be set up. Puzzle generator sets up literally a puzzle. QR code, I haven't got the faintest idea what that's used for. I really don't. It sets up these things, but I have no idea what you'd use that for. Not the foggiest. I guess it's for business use and nothing that I'm interested in. Rhinestones. You can do rhinestone patterns, and you set the size of your rhinestones and it will automatically fill patterns or go around the edge and things like that. Shadow layer, pretty basic for any kind of software of this type. Symmetrical mirror, pretty obvious. Tiling, it will allow you to tile an image if you want to. Title crawl is useful, I guess, if you're doing signage. Usually for people doing signage, not so much for people doing card making and that sort of thing. Wave is a useful one. It's very good for making what would be a completely boring object into a less boring object. So if you set up wave, you have cycles, which is how many times it waves, and you have the amplitude, which is how much it waves. So you can imagine playing around with this is quite good fun. And we have weeding, that's for when you're doing vinyl designs. And then we have wrapper. We're going to have a look at weeding. So I need to select my letters here. Now, as you can see, there's lots of loops and things in here, and weeding is set to make this easier to weed. Weeding is taking out the excess from a design. If you're cutting out a vinyl word, for example, you want to take the excess away. But when you're doing that, if you have relatively large pieces of vinyl to weed, such as this here, quite often it will pick up the smaller letters as well, and you really don't want that. So weeding lines make doing vinyl cuts an awful lot easier. So you go to effects and you go to weeding, and you'll get various options up here. And the one I like to use is this one here. And you simply click where you want to put your lines. And depending on the option that you have chosen, you will get vertical lines or horizontal lines. So I can put some verticals in. I might decide that it's a good idea to have a vertical line just there, and maybe another one there, and just for good measure, one there and maybe one there. So when I'm actually taking the vinyl out, I'll have these little bits to weed, and it makes it so much easier to get your letters to stay in place that it just is worth doing. It's worth taking a few seconds to do that. Okay, so a very useful feature to have. Now, the last one on this list is a wrapper. Now, again, this is a useful one. If you want to put lettering around a glass or something to that effect, it's a very useful one to have. You can see that was given a very funny result to start off with. And I think I need to make the bottom diameter a bit bigger, so there we are. Now, if I was going to put this around a glass with a wider top than base, what I need to do is to change the shape so that it will form around the object that I want to stick it on. So you can play with this. And you can curve it to your heart's content. You can alter the slant height and so on and so forth. You can offset things, so you can make it go from side to side. You can make it go up and down, and you can scale it however you so wish. And if you keep it on auto preview, you can see those actions live. So a very useful one to have. Right, we're now onto the text. You can pick your font out of your list from up here, or you can actually go to the library and pick the fonts from there, and size inches. Now the view, if you have clicked show outlines only, then only the outlines will show and the fill will not, which can be a bit confusing if you've left that clicked and you're putting in colours and you're thinking, why haven't I got any colour in here? That may well be why. And you can zoom, you can fit to the window, you can put it to actual size. Now, if you're on a Mac, beware of actual size, because actual size isn't actual size. And what I tend to do is if I click to actual size, I will take a note over here of what the measurement is supposed to be, and I'll put a ruler against my screen. If you have a Windows computer, you can actually calibrate your screen so that what you see is what you get, but there isn't a way of doing that on Macs that I know of. I used to do it on a Windows machine many years ago, but I haven't ever managed to do it on a Mac. Right, snap to, grid or guidelines, objects, bounds, or that's the outside of your objects, the center, or layers within objects. So that's pretty obvious. Show the grid, show matte cake circles, you can have those. Ruler units, I've got mine in centimeters, guidelines. You can show, hide, lock, unlock, clear them, edit them, all sorts of things from there. Grids are done from this page setup here, we haven't got to that one yet. And cutter, so you can choose your mat size, the orientation, you can preview, you can, in my case, cut with a silver bullet, you can alter your cutter settings, go to my cutter. Tablet connection is for those of you who have a Shortcut Slot version 3 on a tablet. I don't have it because it's so outdated compared to the software that I'm using that I really can't be bothered. If I want to do any design work on my tablet, I use a different drawing program, so I don't use that. And window, you can show your library, project info, workspace, so you can alter your workspace a bit. You can minimize, bring everything to the front, blah, blah, blah. And there is a help tab which will give you a certain amount of help if you need it. Phew, I did tell you this was going to be a long video. I wasn't exaggerating, was I? A lot of the stuff which I've gone through on this top bar is actually available on these menus here. Undo and redo are pretty obvious and they're very useful, very well used buttons. Importing SVGs. SVGs are scalable vector graphics, and they are basically what you are creating in this software. You're creating vectors in this software, and that allows you to import vectors. So they are cut lines already, okay? And they may come with or without an image to go with them, but they are cut lines. Tracing. Okay, tracing an image. I will have to do a separate video on this because it's a rather involved topic, and if I do tracing in here as well as other things, you'll never get to the end of the video. Library. Now this is a useful tool, and you can see it has shapes, fonts and projects. Now shapes are various things. I've even got a section in here. I gave Shortcut Slot some shapes to use, and they've put them in the library. I must get around to adding to that at some point. Now fonts, this gives you an alternative way of viewing your fonts. So if you want to see what each individual letter looks like, you can look at it here and you can expand that. And you can make these bigger. If you're anything like me, you need them a little bigger, then that's the way to do it. And then projects, so you have my projects and I've got them split up into categories. You can put in folders, individual projects, all sorts of things. And that is where they are saved in a SCAL format. Preview is where you preview what you've got on your workspace. So if I put a shape in here and I go to preview, it will show me my cut lines in red. So if I switch that off, the cut line should switch off, and it hasn't. Okay, that may be the setting that I've got on the line, mind you. Show printable. Okay, so that was a printable line. Show print and cut registration marks. Get rid of those, put them on again. Show print margins. There we go. That's because I've got it set to A5 page at the moment. And you can have the show notes. So there's an awful lot of information you can get on there. And then for the cutter, this is where you send it to your cutter, and I don't want to go through that just at the moment. So those are the basic editing things, and here are all your drawing tools down the side. This one is pretty obvious, it's selection. This is selection by bounding box or whatever. This one is a freehand selection. This one is a shape tool to edit the nodes in an outline. So if I click on a node, I can move it around. The text tool has a couple of different variations. Normal typing, vertical typing, typing on a path, or typing on an arch. So for example, if I choose typing on an arch and I put in things like that, oh, isn't that pretty? It gives an arch. And you can have it to the outside or to the inside of the arch. And you can change the radius. There we go. And you can change the start angle. So you can alter this an awful lot. It's great fun to play with that. This one is for adding and subtracting nodes. Then you've got a pencil tool. This has got a certain amount of freehand smoothing, but not a lot. You have a brush tool. And you have an eraser. There we go. Now the important thing with an eraser is it does have a couple of different shapes. It has square or circle. Has size that you can change. You can either keep closed paths like this one, or if you don't have that checked, and for some reason that took my computer a little while to do, it will leave them open like that. You've got squares, rounded rectangles, circles, triangles, polygons, which you can alter the number of sides on. Stars, again, you can alter the size. And you can also alter the inner radius. So if I do a star, you can put the radius down, put the radius up. You can alter the number of points, and you can generally play around with that. Right, spiral. Whee! And again, you can change the number of turns, all sorts of things. You know it clockwise or counterclockwise as well. So lots of variations on that. Then we have the colour picker, which acts as a colour picker to copy and fill and stroke. And you have a button here for a gradient if you want to do a gradient fill. You have a knife tool. A knife tool will, if you select that one, just cut the line, and then you can separate the lines afterwards. So if I break apart where I put a cut there, you can take that piece out. It also acts as a crop tool. You've got the crop selection here, so you can do that, and if you press the return key, you just crop it to whatever you selected. Again, can be quite handy depending on what you want to do. This one here allows you to distort whatever shape you have made by altering the corners of it. This one is a stencil tool. When you're making stencils and you need a bridge between pieces, you use that tool to put a bridge in. This one is your zoom. Then you have a ruler so you can measure from point to point. And for example, I can do this. And if you look up here, it's going to tell you the distance you've covered and the angle that you're actually placing your line. So if you want to make sure you are completely horizontal or completely vertical, that is something that you can check with that. Okay. And then you have this hand tool which moves around or allows you to move around on the screen if you're in a zoom mode. So there we go, and I'm going to put this back to fit to window. So first of all we have the document. This is where you select your paper size or your mat size, your orientation. You can show the grid and you can alter the size of your grid lines if you want to do that. And you can show guidelines. There we are, there's a guideline. And there's the other guideline. So you can put your guidelines in. I don't like guidelines that much, so I tend not to use them. Show outlines only. If you've got a lot of things going on in your design, sometimes that's useful. Show the print margins. Now this one is useful. Show registration marks. This was not included in the earlier versions. And if you're trying to position things on a page, I'm just going to get rid of the grid because I really don't like it. If you're trying to put a lot of things on a page and work out whether you can print them or not, so let me just put some shapes on. Okay. Now, at the moment, I have got it set so that it shows my print and cut registration marks. And that is quite a handy thing to do. So if I go back into here, you can see immediately that I can't get everything that I want to print onto here. So if I move this on here, my registration marks move back in, and I can tell that's fine. In previous versions of the software, you had to go to the preview button. It would then show these marks, and then you'd have to close that down, then go back, alter this, and then go back to the preview and check again. You've got them set here to show the registration marks. You don't have the aggravation of doing that. Show page colour. You can change the colour of the page if you want. So if, for example, you were doing a lot of white stuff and you can't see it normally, instead of changing the colour of your items, you can change the colour of the page. And then if that was white, it would obviously show up, wouldn't it? I'm going to put that back to what it was before. And show template. There are various templates that you can use in this program. And I can't say that I really know what I would do with these, but you can put templates in. And you can remove them later if you want to. I'm not quite sure what use they have, but I'm sure that someone uses them. Perhaps you'll tell me what you do with them. And it will tell you what your template is underneath, which I suppose is quite handy. Now remember when I said in the preferences, you could set nudge and arrow key increment. Okay, this is the nudge. So whatever you've got in this is how much these will move your design on the page. And the arrow key increment is the one that's on your keyboard, on your laptop or your computer. And so you can alter those. This is how to align objects to a selection or to the page. So if I click right, that item that I had selected will go to the right of the page. If I click left, it will go to the left, and so on and so forth. You can use it to center by setting it to do things with these two, and to selection, for example, I can get everything, get everything centered, and it'll be like so. Let's just select this so I get it highlighted. You can change the dimensions, keep the proportions or not, as you wish. You can rotate it like that, or you can use the handles and rotate freely, up to you. You can flip horizontally and vertically. There are some hints down here, but they don't cover too many subjects. Fill and stroke, pretty obvious. The fill and the stroke colour. The stroke is your outer line, and you can change the line width if you wish. Now bear in mind, this does not change anything in the cut, it simply makes the line look thicker. So if you're going to print this, it will look like a thick line. Right. And you can alter the type of join, so you can have sharp corners, rounded corners, or bevels. And again, with the end caps of the lines, you can do the same thing. The line style, you can choose various different things, and you can add other ones. So for example, I have a line here. I can edit this. I can change the gaps between the dashes, etc. and then save them as my own personal preference. And then down here you have the layer folder. Now because I've already clicked that button to put it here, my layers are appearing here. And you can alter layers by putting them up and down. And you can select your layers. So if you want to select a particular item, you can sometimes use the layer tab to do it. You might find it easier, you can extend it. You can get rid of empty layers. You can arrange them, show, hide them, lock or unlock them. That's removing empty layers. Or you could add another layer folder, for example, if you wanted to, and you can put various things in it. You can add new pages to your project, so you can name that whatever you like. You can change the page tab color, and you can set it. You can go into your projects by going to the library and go to projects and go to miscellaneous, for example. In this section, I'm going to go through the cutter menu. So my cutter is the Silver Bullet Platinum. Most of this would apply to the Silver Bullet as well, with the exception of the double heads, because the Silver Bullet, the normal one, doesn't have a double head. So this is what you get, and here's your preview. Now, as you can see at the moment, on here and on here, my letters are not unionized, or they're not a compound path if you come from Silhouette Studio, and so each of these would be overlapping or would cut out of the other, and that's not something that I would normally want, but there is a way to adjust that in any case. So you have your general setup, Platinum Pro, settings, USB, auto. Don't have to alter any of that lot. If you are new to the Platinum Pro, then you set it up in your cutter settings when you first get your machine. After that, you don't need to do anything. You have different cut modes. You have what you see is what you get, which is literally what you see is what you get, and it puts it exactly where it looks as though it is on the paper. You have cut from origin point, and basically what origin point means, it would cut from the selection box. If I select this and give it a bounding box, it starts cutting from that position there. So when you're setting up your machine, you put your blade in the bottom right corner here, and then if you've got origin selected, that's where it would cut from. If you have what you see is what you get selected, it's going to cut there. And there is another option which gives you the option to cut from the center point. So that is the center point of whatever design you have on the page. End action, you can choose to end the action. You can advance it a certain amount, or you can do nothing, or it can return to origin. So if it does nothing, it just stops when it finishes. That's where it stops, that's that. Rewind to origin is quite handy because if you have done a single cut on a silver bullet and you think, drat, I haven't quite put enough pressure on that, my blade has got blunt or whatever, and I haven't cut right the way through, if you have it rewind to origin, you can just press the repeat button and it will go over exactly the same cut line as you originally cut. So you can either cut it twice or you can set it to increase the pressure and cut it again. It is extremely precise. It will cut in exactly the same position time and time and time again. Right, you can set it to cut selection only. So if you've got a lot of things on your mat but you only want to cut out one of them, you do that. And you can mirror it. So you can click it like that. Now, as you can see, this doesn't alter how it is on your mat. It only alters it for the cut. And you can alter it vertically as well. So that's a useful one to think about if you have to do a reverse design or something. You can do all your designing so it's the right way, but if you know you have to reverse it, you can reverse it in here. Now, regarding the Silver Bullet Platinum, I have already made a complete video on how to set it up for cutting with two tools, so I'm not going to go into that here. And the custom presets and all the rest of it, I've done that bit already. In here you can increase the pressure or the speed or the up speed, that's the speed the blade goes up, obviously. And you can add new custom presets and all sorts of things. But I've gone into that in a separate video. And layers, so you can cut by layer and things like that. You can alter, I should say, the cut order in this version of the software. And you can use layer presets or not use layer presets. So if you have a layer set to a certain type of preset, certain type of cut or whatever, you can use those. Or you can say, actually, I don't want to use those, I just want to cut it any old how. You can do cut by color. If you've got more than one color, you can select it to cut by whatever color. Lines or stroke. Sorry, lines or fill. So stroke or fill color you can set it to. And you can cut them as a single job or you can cut them separately. So you can tile the image and set it to cut tiles. You can edit your tiles, and it's pretty obvious in here what you need to do, so I won't bother going through that too much. You can set it to cut extras as well, so you have cut copies and you can match the workspace dimensions, auto fit columns and rows. Won't do anything with this is way too big anyway. So yeah, you can do that. And the beauty of doing it here is that it doesn't affect your workspace. Your workspace stays the same and it's just the cut that you are altering. So that's the cut setting. Down here we have print and cut, and again I have done a separate video on how to set up the print and cut and the calibration. This spanner over here has some very useful options in it. It's the style tab, and you can see here the style says normal, but you can cut shadow, rounded, straight shadow, blackout. Blackout removes little pieces. You've got a shadow blackout rounded, shadow blackout straight. It's difficult to say. You can set the different cut line types in here. So you either have a draw, print and cut, cut, normal, print and cut, print, color layer alignment. That's for people largely who are doing multi-layers of vinyl cut. and Flex Cut, which is for Suma, and I don't know anything about that. It's a different brand of cutter, so I don't know anything about that one. And in here, if you do have the platinum machine, this is where you choose the right or the left tool. Again, I said I did cover that in a previous video, and it's well worth looking at that one. And then this is also where you can make up your presets. And again, I covered that in the previous video. But the other thing which a lot of people ignore, and it's very handy, is this weld one. Now you can see my letters. I've kept them quite deliberately. I've kept them completely and utterly separate. But if I choose the weld setting, when I go to do a cut, and if I choose a preview, you can see that the cut line is ignoring the bits where it overlaps. Again, that is one of the things that doesn't affect the file, it just does it when you cut. So there we go. I hope you find it useful. Take care now. Bye-bye.